Hello everyone, the topic today we will be discussing is types of problem solving strategies. Now we look into the different problem solving strategies which include heuristics and biases, means and analysis and computer simulation. We look at heuristics and biases. In this we will be seeing first what is heuristics. The study of heuristics in human decision making was developed in 1970s and 80s by psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, although the concept was originally introduced by Herbert A. Simon. We make decisions and judgments every day. If we can trust someone, if we should do something or not, which route to take, how to respond to someone who is upset, the list goes on and on. If we carefully considered and analyzed every possible outcome of these decisions and judgments, we would never do anything else. Unfortunately, humans aren't as fast as computers and need some other way to narrow down the possible solutions to only a few. Thankfully, our mind makes things easier for us by using efficient thinking strategies known as heuristics. A heuristic or rule of thumb is a simple rule that is intended to apply to many situations, whereas an algorithm is very specific and will always lead to a solution. A heuristic is an educated guess based on prior experiences that helps narrow down the possible solutions for a problem. Psychological heuristics are models for making inferences that rely heavily on core human. People often use heuristics in everyday life because they have found them useful, though they are not always dependable. Now we look at some of the biases. While heuristics can speed up our problem and the decision making process, they can introduce errors. As you saw in the above example, heuristics can lead to inaccurate judgments about how common things occur and about how representative certain things may be. Just because something has worked in the past does not mean that it will work again, and relying on an existing heuristic can make it difficult to see alternative solutions or come up with new ideas. Heuristics can also contribute to things such as stereotypes and prejudice. Because the people use mental shortcuts to classify and categorize people, they often overlook more relevant information and create stereotyped categorizations that are not in tune with reality. Heuristics, while useful, are imperfect if relied on too heavily. They can result in incorrect judgments or cognitive biases. Some are more likely to steer people wrong than others. In order to make good decisions, we use our knowledge and our reasoning. Often this knowledge and reasoning is sound and solid. Sometimes, however, we are swayed by biases or by others manipulating a situation. For example, let's say you and 3 friends wanted to rent a house and had a combined target budget of rupees 1600. The realtor shows you only very rundown houses for rupees 1600 and then shows you a very nice house for rupees 2000. Might you ask each person to pay more in rent to get the 2000 home? Why would the realtor show you the rundown houses and the nice house? The realtor may be challenging your anchoring bias. An anchoring bias occurs when you focus on one piece of information when making a decision or solving a problem. In this case, you are so focused on the amount of money you are willing to spend that you may not recognize what kinds of houses available at that price point. The confirmation bias is the tendency to focus on information that confirms your existing beliefs. For example, if you think that your professor is not very nice, you notice all the instances of rude behavior exhibited by the professor, while ignoring the countless pleasant interactions he is involved in on a daily basis. Hindsight bias leads you to believe that the event you just experienced was predictable, even though it really wasn't. In other words, you knew all along that things would turn out the way they did. Representative bias describes a faulty way of thinking in which you unintentionally stereotype someone or something. For example, you may assume that your professors spend their free time reading books and engaging in intellectual conversations because the idea of them spending their time playing volleyball or visiting an amusement park does not fit in with your stereotypes of professors. Finally, the availability heuristic is a heuristic in which you make a decision based on an example information or recent experience that is readily available to you, even though it may not be the best example to inform your decision. Biases tend to preserve that which is already established to maintain our pre-existing knowledge, beliefs, attitudes and hypotheses. If we look at the following table, the biases and its description. The first one, that is anchoring bias, which means tendency to focus on one particular piece of information when making decisions or problem solving. The second bias, that is confirmation, which means focuses on information that confirms existing beliefs. The third bias, which is hindsight, which means belief that the event just experienced was predictable. The fourth bias, which is representative, which means unintentional stereotyping of someone or something. The fifth bias, which is availability, which means decision is based upon either an available precedent or an example that may be faulty. Now, let us look at the next strategy type, which is means end analysis. Means end analysis is a problem solving technique that identifies the current state, defines the end goal and determines the action plan to reach the end state in a modular way. End goals are split into sub-goals and sub-sub-goals, and then action plans are drawn to achieve sub-goals first and then move towards achieving the main goal progressively. Most of the problem solving strategies will have either forward actions or backward actions. This approach is useful in solving chess problems, working through mathematical proofs, in programming computers, and as well as solving day-to-day problems. In means ends analysis, one solves a problem by considering the obstacles that stand between the initial problem state and the goal state. The elimination of these obstacles are then defined as simpler sub-goals to be achieved. When all of the sub-goals have been achieved, when all of the obstacles are out of the way, then the main goal of interest has been achieved, because the sub-goals have been called up by the need to solve this main goal. Means end analysis can be viewed as a search strategy in which the long range goal is always kept in mind to guide problem solving. For example, a woman wanted a certain kind of invitation for her wedding, but buying it already made was very expensive and well over her budget. She ordered one sample of the invitation and examined it carefully. In the invitation, it had a pocket inside that held the response cards for people to send back to her, a decorative seashell tied onto the outside of the card with fancy ribbon, and a small box instead of an envelope. Her goal was to make 200 of these invitations by hand. Her sub-goals were to find the paper, take the invitation carefully apart to see how to put one together, buy the little shells, find and buy the right size boxes for mailing, and assemble the invitation. What might have seemed an impossible task became possible to achieve once it was broken down into smaller sub-goals. Next, we look at the another technique called computer simulation. A number of researchers have tried to program computers to perform tasks that human beings do. Such computer simulation research has had a profound influence on psychology of human cognitive processes. The method consists of programming a computer to work in a specified manner and comparing its performance to that of human subjects given the same tasks. Researchers employing computer simulation have made major contributions to the development of information processing view of problem solving. A problem requires a person not only to register information from the environment, but also to operate on, modify or transform that information in some way in order to reach a solution. Solving problem also requires the retrieval of both factual and procedural knowledge from long-term memory. Especially for longer problems, reaching a solution might involve repeated storage and retrieval of information generated early in the problem for use in later stages. Even this brief listing clearly indicates that problem solving is not a single cognitive process, but rather involves a number of activities which need to be properly executed and organized to be successful. The most promising kind of theory in the early 1980s involves computer simulation. In the last couple of decades, a number of computer simulation theories of problem solving have emerged. Cognitive scientists try to devise computer simulations for several reasons. First, they want to test the sufficiency of these theories. According to global propositional models of cognition, a theory is embodied in a computer program can be tested by seeing whether the theory can do what it is intended to do. Second, theorists want to define terms such as understanding and representation as explicitly as possible. Third, and the most important, a computer simulation is a genuine psychological theory that helps to guide research and unearth useful concepts. Computers and people obviously differ in their physical composition, yet they both manipulate symbols and they may perform a particular act by following logically similar steps and procedures. So, to the extent that a simulation models human performance accurately, then to the extent the simulation is an adequate psychological theory. In devising computer models, theorists often break new ground using information from other disciplines such as computer science. If, for example, cognitive psychologists have not clarified the types of representations people use, then they may turn to computer scientists to pick up ideas about representations. In practice, these ideas turn out to be useful in psychological theories. Indeed, psychological theories emphasizing schemata and propositional representations owe a large debt to research in computer science, because successful computer simulations do introduce powerful new concepts that are genuine theoretical advances, not just noteworthy technological achievements. We now examine briefly one of the most important efforts at simulations, the general problem solver, which is also called as GPS, which was developed by Newell, Shaw and Simon in 1958. It introduced a way of looking at problem solving which has influenced virtually all problem solving theories. The general problem solver, that is a GPS, this program was equipped with the equivalent of a limited capacity working memory characterized by rapid storage and retrieval, a large capacity long-term memory characterized by relatively low storage and retrieval, a serial processor that performs one operation at a time, a reliance upon heuristics rather than algorithms that would require a large number of high-speed calculations. Newell and his colleagues collected verbal protocols that were used and kept as a record of people talking aloud as they solved problems. Then they transcribed these lengthy records carefully to see if they could find general heuristics that emerged. It introduced a way of conceptualizing problem that is adopted in most contemporary theories of problem solving. The general problem solver assumes that the problem solver represents a problem as a problem space which consists of a set of nodes, each node corresponding to a state of knowledge about the problem. The problem solver begins at the initial state of knowledge and seeks to convert it into the goal state by applying operators, which are actions that are permitted in order to move from one state to another. Problem solving then requires a constructive search during which the solver builds up a problem space which leads from the initial to goal state using a set of allowed operators. Now, we look at one of the case studies regarding this topic. Here is a case of Cameron who is going to visit his grandparents. His flight leaves at 9 p.m. He must be at the airport 2 hours before departure and he lives 1 hour from the airport. Cameron knows that he will need 1.5 hours to pack and get ready for his trip. Cameron arrives home from school at 4 p.m. How can Cameron figure out if he will make his flight in time? This is Cameron's timeline. Cameron arrived home at 4 p.m. He needs 1.5 hours to pack. He has a 1 hour drive to get to the airport. Cameron must be at the airport 2 hours prior to his departure time. His flight leaves at 9 p.m. Next, Cameron has to make a plan of what he can do with all this information. Working backwards from the departure time will tell him what time he should leave the house. Cameron arrived home at 4 p.m. so he should be able to make his flight. In the above case, we see the use of heuristics to arrive at a solution. The working background heuristic is a method of problem solving in which an individual imagines they have already solved the problem they are trying to solve. By imagining the problem is solved, they can then work backwards in their mind and eventually visualize a solution to the problem. By trying to find the multiple connections from a problem solution, one can use the connections to discover a suitable solution. The working backward heuristic is commonly used in mathematics and in logic problems. Now, we look at the summary of this chapter. Problem solving is something that we go through on a daily basis. As problems never end, the need to solve them is also everlasting. From managing your books properly on a shelf to deciding the next step for your career, the problems can be small or big, but they need to be solved on daily basis. Study in cognitive psychology has definitely made our lives easier to some extent. There are concrete psychological steps involved in problem solving, which, if properly followed, can help us tackle every sort of problems. One of the important aspects of solving a problem is forming a good strategy. A strategy might be well thought of, rigorous, and a sure winner, but might not be viable given the resources available in hand. Many different strategies exist for problem solving. Typical strategies include trial and error, applying algorithms, and using heuristics and biases, means and analysis, and computer simulation. To solve a large complicated problem, it often helps to break the problem into smaller steps that can be accomplished individually, leading to an overall solution. Roadblocks to problem solving include a mental set, functional fixedness, and various biases that can cloud decision making skills. Every strategy you build for solving a specific problem, be it buying groceries or deciding your career, can be narrowed down into one of the above strategy techniques. Some strategies are a combination of algorithms and heuristics, which may include making use of a step-by-step procedures for solving certain types of problems or following the rule of thumb, which is an educated guess based on prior experiences that help narrow down the possible solutions for a problem. While others are based on trial and error, which tries one solution after another until finding one that works. Choose wisely, analyzing your resources, collecting information and monitoring progress. Finally, in both the episodes, we have covered different problem solving strategies, which are algorithms, uses of algorithms, different types of heuristics and the related biases, means and analysis and computer simulation.